At 52 years old, I believed that the worst storms of life were behind me, that the betrayals capable of shattering the heart were ghosts of my youth, tucked away in the impulsive years of my 20s. How wrong I was. On that gray, rainy afternoon in Portland, Oregon, the sky seemed to carry the weight of a truth I had yet to uncover. As I opened the door to my bakery, Ellen's Hearth, the warm scent of cinnamon and brown sugar, usually my faithful embrace, was tainted by something sharp, the metallic sting of betrayal. There she was, Diane, my best friend, my soul sister, the woman with whom I had shared laughter, tears, and secrets. She was leaning over the rustic wooden counter, my recipe book open in front of her, that leather-bound tome worn by time, where every page held not just measurements and methods, but pieces of my soul, dreams written in ink and smudged with flour. Her fingers traced the lines of a recipe I had created for our first friendship anniversary. A lavender lemon cake she had once sworn never to share. Beside her stood Tom, my husband of 25 years, so close their shoulders touched. He was caressing, her hands with a tenderness I hadn't seen in years, their fingers intertwined over the yellowed paper, as if sealing a secret pact. His eyes, usually so steady, now avoided mine, heavy with a guilt louder than any words. In that instant, the world stopped. The jingle of the bells above the door, once a sound of joy, now rang out like a mourning cry. Diane hadn't just stolen my recipes. She had betrayed the oath we had made right there in that bakery, under candlelight, to protect one another. She had taken my trust, my love, my life. And Tom, with his treacherous touch, had helped erase everything we had built. They walked out without a word, the echo of the bells mocking the happiness I had so carefully crafted. This is my story, Ellen's story, of losing everything and piece by piece finding myself again. Diane and I were more than friends. We were family, forged in the messy, hopeful chaos of our 30s. We met in a cramped cooking class in Seattle, two women carrying the weight of half-lived lives. I was married to Tom, childless by choice, pouring my heart and soul into a fledgling bakery. Diane, fresh out of a messy divorce, dreamed of building a catering empire, her eyes sparkling with ambition. At the Brood Bean, a cafe with fogged-up windows and the hum of espresso machines, we would sit for hours, our laughter drowning out the rain. We teased each other about graying hairs, creaky knees after long days, and future plans that seemed endless. I cooked with my soul, crafting recipes that whispered of my childhood, my mother's blackberry jam, my father's love for cardamom bread. Diane cooked with sheer talent, her dishes bold, unforgettable, just like her. We were a perfect match, two sides of the same coin, destined to shine together. Tom was my anchor. A high school history teacher with a quiet smile, he would come, home to our cozy apartment, tie loosened, and sample my latest creations. His feedback was kind but honest, and his praise was a tenderness I carried with me back into the kitchen. Diane adored him, often calling him the kind of guy every woman hopes for, and I would laugh, feeling lucky. How could I not trust her? She was the one who held me when my father passed away, her arms steady as I cried through the night. She stayed up late with me at the bakery, helping me perfect my sourdough, her hands dusted with flour as we dreamed of Ellen's Hearth becoming a Portland legend. We were unbreakable, or so I thought, bound by laughter, by loss, and by the promise of a shared future. At 50, Ellen's Hearth was my triumph. Tucked away on a busy street in Portland, its windows glowed with the promise of comfort, and my maple pecan scones had gained a cult following, their buttery crumble drawing lines out the door. I was working on a cookbook, Flavors of Home, a love letter to the Pacific Northwest, each recipe a story of roots and resilience. Diane was there, a constant presence, suggesting recipe names, tweaking dish ideas, her laughter filling the quiet moments of the bakery. But then, the atmosphere changed. Diane grew distant, her messages short, her excuses piling up like autumn leaves. Buffet services, she would say, brushing off my concern. Tom, too, began staying out late, blaming teacher meetings or grading papers. I ignored it. Life is busy, isn't it? At 50, you trust the people you've built your world with. Then came the whispers, soft at first, like a drizzle before a storm. Customers mentioned a new catering company, Diane's Delights, serving scones, just like Ellen's. I laughed it off, told myself recipes are meant to be shared, that imitation is flattery. But the doubt settled in, a cold, heavy weight, in my chest. One rainy afternoon, I closed the bakery early, my boots splashing through puddles as I made my way home. What I saw froze my heart. Diane, in my kitchen, copying from my recipe book, her pen moving swiftly across the pages, and Tom beside her, holding a contract bearing her logo, their voices low and conspiratorial. They weren't just stealing my work, they were building a life together, one that didn't include me. The truth unraveled like an overworked dough. Diane had been passing off my recipes as her own, winning over clients with the flavors born from my soul. Worse, she and Tom had been lovers for months, their betrayal a knife buried deep in my back. I confronted them, my voice shaking with rage and heartbreak. Diane's tears were hollow, her excuse, it just happened, a lie I couldn't swallow. Tom's apologies were mumbled, his eyes unable to meet mine. I threw them out, the door slamming shut on my past. I filed for divorce, closed the bakery, and watched my dreams collapse around me. At 50, I thought my story had ended. I fled Portland. For a small town in Oregon's wine country, a place of rolling hills and quiet mornings, where the air smelled of earth and possibility. My rented house was bare, its empty walls a mirror of my heart. I found a job at a local bookstore, shelving novels and avoiding my reflection in the glass doors. My hands, once full of flour and dough, now turned pages, their purpose lost. I stopped baking. The act felt too raw, too tied to the woman I had been, Ellen, the baker, the dreamer. At night, I would sit on the porch, the stars burning bright overhead, and wonder who I was without my bakery, without Tom, without Diane. The silence was a weight, heavier than any sadness I had ever known. But small towns have a way of pulling you back to life. My neighbor, Rosa, a retired chef with gray hair and a summer laugh, noticed my silence. One cool morning, she knocked on my door, her eyes kind but firm, and invited me into her kitchen. "Make something," she said, handing me an apron. "Anything." I resisted. The idea of flour on my hands was a wound I wasn't ready to touch, but Rosa's warmth was a tide, gently pulling me in. I made a simple blueberry muffin, my fingers clumsy at first, then steadying, the rhythm of mixing a faint echo of my old self. As the scent filled the air, I cried, not for Tom or for Diane, but for the Ellen I had buried, the one who believed in beauty and creation. Rosa didn't push. She just poured me a cup of coffee and said, "You're still in there, you know." Her words were a seed, small, stubborn, taking root in the desert of my heart. At 52, I started over. Not with the fire of youth, but with the quiet strength of a woman who had walked through ashes. I opened a small cafe, Second Rise, in the heart of town, with walls painted the soft blue of dawn. No scones, no echoes of Ellen's hearth. Instead, I created new recipes, born from this moment. Buttery lavender shortbread that crumbled. Like forgiveness, hazelnut pies carrying the warmth of home, rosemary focaccia that spoke of deep roots. Each dish was a piece of who I was now, not the woman Diane had betrayed, but Ellen, rebuilt. I fled Portland for a small town in Oregon's wine country, a place of rolling hills and quiet mornings, where the air smelled of earth and possibility. My rented house was bare, its empty walls a mirror of my heart. I found a job at a local bookstore, shelving novels and avoiding my reflection in the glass doors. My hands, once full of flour and dough, now turned pages, their purpose lost. I stopped baking, The act felt too raw, too tied to the woman I had been. Ellen, the baker, the dreamer. At night, I would sit on the porch, the stars burning, bright overhead, and wonder who I was without my bakery, without Tom, without Diane. The silence was a weight, heavier than any sadness I had ever known. But small towns have a way of pulling you back to life. My neighbor, Rosa, a retired chef with gray hair and a summer laugh, noticed my silence. One cool morning, she knocked on my door, her eyes kind but firm, and invited me into her kitchen. "Make something," she said, handing me an apron. "Anything," I resisted. The idea of flour on my hands was a wound I wasn't ready to touch. But Rosa's warmth was a tide, gently pulling me in. I made a simple blueberry muffin, my fingers clumsy at first, then steadying, the rhythm of mixing a faint echo of my old self. As the scent filled the air, I cried, not for Tom or for Diane, but for the Ellen I had buried, the one who believed in beauty and creation. Rosa didn't push. She just poured me a cup of coffee and said, "You're still in there, you know." Her words were a seed, small, stubborn, taking root in the desert of my heart. At 52, I started over, not with the fire of youth, but with the quiet strength of a woman who had walked through ashes. I opened a small cafe, second rise in the heart of town, with walls painted the soft blue of dawn. No scones, no echoes of Ellen's hearth. Instead, I created new recipes, born from this moment. Buttery lavender shortbread that crumbled like forgiveness, hazelnut pies carrying the warmth of home, rosemary focaccia that spoke of deep roots. Each dish was a piece of who I was now, not the woman Diane had betrayed, but Ellen, rebuilt. Word spread, first among the locals who lingered over coffee, then among tourists drawn by whispers of something special. A food critic from Portland visited, and her review called Second Rise, a testament to resilience, a place where loss becomes love. I framed it, not out of pride, but as a reminder of how far I had come. I never finished Flavors of Home, but I began teaching baking classes, sharing my craft with women like me, women who had faced loss, who had thought their stories were over. We gathered in the cafe's kitchen, our hands dusted with flour, our laughter a melody of survival. Diane's betrayal had broken me, but it had also set me free. I don't know where she is now, and I don't care. Tom is a faded memory, his apologies dust in the wind. My cafe, my classes, my new recipes, they are mine, built from the ashes of what once was. At 52, I learned that betrayal can burn you down to nothing, but from that nothing, you can rise stronger. The wrinkles on my face tell that story, etched like recipes into my skin, and I wear them as medals. The seasons changed in wine country, each one a milestone in my growth. Spring brought blooms to the hills and new faces to Second Rise, their stories blending with mine over cups of chamomile tea. I would walk to the cafe at dawn, the air heavy with promise, and pause to watch, the mist curl over the vineyards. This was my home now, not just the town, but the life I had carved from the ruins. My hands, once hesitant, moved with purpose again, shaping doughs, folding herbs, creating dishes that felt like letters to myself. I thought of Diane sometimes, not with anger, but with a strange sense of gratitude. Her betrayal had been a storm, but it had cleared the way for this. Ellen, unburdened, alive. One summer night, a letter arrived at the cafe, forwarded from Portland. It was from a publisher who had heard of Second Rise, asking if I would consider writing a cookbook, not Flavors of Home, but something new, a story of beginnings. I sat with the letter under the cafe's string lights, the hum of crickets filling the air, and felt a spark I hadn't felt in years. I began to write, not just recipes, but the moments behind them, the muffin that brought me back, the pie that tasted like courage. The book, From Ashes, became my truth, each page a step toward wholeness. When it was published, I didn't send a copy to Diane or Tom. It wasn't for them. It was for me, and for every woman in my classes who had found her way back to herself. Now, at 53, I stand in the kitchen of Second Rise, the heat from the oven pulsing steadily around me. The cafe is full, laughter spilling from the tables, the scent of rosemary and lavender weaving through the air. My students, my resilient sisters, knead dough beside me, their hands telling their own stories. I think of Portland, of Ellen's hearth, and I feel no pain. That was a chapter, not the whole book. Diane and Tom are footnotes, their betrayal a distant echo. I've learned that home is not a place. It's a fire you carry within you, a fire no one can steal. My recipes, my cafe, my words, they are sparks from that fire, lighting the way for others. Sometimes I step outside, the Oregon sky stretching overhead, and I feel the weight of my life, not as a burden, but as a gift. The rain still falls, soft now, like a blessing. I am Ellen, not just a baker, but a woman who fell, who burned, and who rose again. My story isn't over. It's written in every pie I bake, in every class I teach, in every wrinkle etched into my face. At 53, I know this. Betrayal can destroy you, but it can also build you. And I am built, strong and welcoming, a home that shines with its own light. That, I have learned, is irresistible. The seasons continue their steady rhythm in the valley. New faces come through the doors of Second Rise, carrying their own broken pieces, their own silent hopes. I welcome them, not with grand promises, but with warm bread, shared laughter, and the quiet assurance that healing comes in small, stubborn steps. Some days, I catch my reflection in the cafe's windows, older now, lined by time and grace, and I smile. This woman, with flower on her hands and light in her eyes, is a woman I fought to become. Not despite the storms, but because of them. I no longer fear betrayal. I no longer mourn what was lost. Instead, I honor what was found: strength, tenderness, resilience, a fire no one can steal. And so I rise every day, again and again, not chasing what once was, but embracing all. That is still beautifully possible, because the heart, like bread, is meant to rise even after it has been broken. Thank you for walking alongside me through Ellen's journey, a story of loss, resilience, and new beginnings. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories of hope, strength, and renewal. Your support helps keep these stories alive and brings light to others who might need it too. There's always another chapter waiting to be written, and sometimes it starts with a single spark.